Thank you for the introduction. Let me say a few more words. Those are my contacts. As Immacolata said before, I'm a senior front-end developer and user interface designer for the Knowage suite, which is an open source data analytics tool. And we participated in some programs and in some projects in order to make the data more accessible and to create some feature to do it. And in the next releases, we are trying to make a product that is really accessible. So we are trying to gather all the feedbacks that we can. We are trying to work also in that direction. And let's go to my past and the reason why I'm supposed to be here. First of all, I'm an engineer, an IT engineer, and I graduated in phonology topics because I like the idea that the fun can change the behavior. And I started my career designing user interfaces for public administrations. As a volunteer, I went in some local schools teaching some accessibility teams to young people in order to make them sensible to that topic. And I participated, as I said before, at the Prosperity for All project from the European Union with our product Knowage. I work as a developer in a data visualization tool, and I'm colorblind, a very common way to be it. And often people tell me, well, how can you do that job if you are colorblind? And we will see how that is possible, and it should be possible for everyone. Let's start with a brief introduction about accessibility. What does accessibility mean specifically? This is the definition. Digital accessibility is the ability of a website, mobile application, or electronic document to be easily navigated, interacted, and understood by a wide range of users, including those users who have visual, auditory, motor, and cognitive disabilities or impairments. What does that mean specifically? It means that we have a lot of different kind of impairments that are some way blocking us to reach the full availability, to the full communication of websites, devices, or in our case, data visualizations. The problem for accessibility is to understand how many different impairments there are and to find different solutions for each one of them to make the widest range of people to be allowed to get that content. For example, we have four main impairments, let's say like that. There are many more, but four main categories. Communication disorder, when there is difficulties to communicate or be understood or to understand something. Hearing impairments, visual impairments, and mobility impairments that are not just related to the full body, but also maybe to hands, to the usage of hands, or to the usage of the shoulders, of arms, so creating difficulties in various levels. And as we can see in the Microsoft Persona spectrum, those impairments can also be split in different categories. For example, we have permanent, temporary, situational, and we have to think about all those different categories to create something that will be useful for everyone. And that's the difficult part about accessibility, because there are a lot of assistive technologies, and there are many more that are coming out almost every year. But the problem is that those technologies are growing, but can't do anything alone. We need to create something that those technologies will be able to read, to understand, and to upgrade also. So those are some of the examples of assistive technologies. Maybe one of the most used are the screen readers, and we will cover them. Later. Those are my thumb rules, let's say, are the ideas behind everything that I'm trying to design or trying to develop. First of all, we need to be inclusive, not exclusive. We don't need to do something that will take just a part of the segment of person. We need to think from different points of view. We are used to something and we don't even notice it, but we need to think from a different point of view. We need to test and to build with disabled people, with people with impairments, because when you do it, you will understand where the difficulties are and how to prevent them. We need to think with using the structure, the context, the semantics, and all the technologies that the web is giving us in this moment. And we need to think that design is not just a beautiful, gorgeous graphic, it's much more. But to summarize everything, usually I love to quote Stitch from Lilo Stitch, that is saying that the main idea behind accessibility is that no one should be left behind or forgotten. Now let's get briefly to where we are in this path of accessibility. We started a long time ago in one of the first law talking about accessibility from the Rehabilitation Act from United States. And it was a first document talking about discrimination of disabilities. Then a few years later, the Americans with Disabilities Act came out in the 90s, and it was the first document talking about accessibility. So this is virtually the moment when accessibility was born. In the 96, that accessibility word that was most related to public offices or to architectonical barrier has become something related also to the web, because if we want something public, it should be also available on the web. And that was the first moment where we had the first guidelines related to digital accessibility. In the 2000, in Europe, we started creating a lot of different laws between different states. For example, in Italy, we had the Stanca law regarding accessibility, and it was the most related to public administration and not so much to the private profile. And in 2005, Apple integrated for the first time an assistive technology in a common usage tool. This is very important because, as I said before, in the private area, there was not so much caring about accessibility. And that was the first main moment where it became, let's say, popular. Then in 2006, we had the Convention on the Right of a Person with Disabilities, ratified by almost all the United Nations, and while the optional protocol was signed by half the participants. In 2008, we had the new VUCAG release, and 10 years later, we had the new version, and always with more features, with more idea, with more patterns, most complete and most updated to today's needings. In 2019, we had the European Accessibility Act, which is different from the old European single states law, because it's something that should be shared between all our countries. And there are more guidelines. In my opinion, is a very important act, a position taken by the Europe United in that direction. And here we are to today. And in the next future, we will have the new VUCAG release, the 2.2 version, that will add some more information, some more guidelines for the web accessibility. And here we get to the big question: why do we need accessibility? The first motivation is related to the numbers behind visual and other digital world related impairments. This is a research from Euroblind, and about one person over 30 Europeans experience some sight loss, not related with glasses usage with myopia, but is related to blindness, related to color blindness, and other vision issues. And the big problem is that the average unemployment rate of those persons is really, really high. And we need also to think that one senior citizen over three has some sight loss. So you can see in that map that is just to give an idea how much of the European population has issues about some sort of visual impairments. And how does that impact over the jobs? In the European, we had a research about Eurostat a few years ago that was asking to the people if they had some issue related to the job that they were taking, and for many different type of issues, from movement issues to taking EV loads and similar. And about 30% over 100 declared yes to that variable, to that KPI that the Eurostat research created, that is the lymph view. For non-manual workers, for people working on digital world, is about 20%. In some of our countries, it's even much, much higher. And this distribution is about 10% and 5% related to something that is blocking the usage of devices, of computer, or is giving us some problem in the vision or in hearing. So it's something that is limiting our access to the web. And here we get to the big problem. For a research from the QE Nucleus, the 70% of the website are inaccessible. They test them with 70 blind persons, and were analyzing hundreds of websites, also very important websites, and they've seen that the 70% of them are inaccessible. So they are like a completely white screen for people that are not allowed to hear, to see, or to move without the mouse. This is a very, very big problem, and that's the motivation behind us trying to make something accessible. And here we get to the data visualization. Data visualization is the art of showing data in the best way to help the decisional processes. We are in an age of majestic and very beautiful infographics, and we are creating storytelling processes. But if data visualization, with that visualization in the name, is all related to vision, how can people with visual impairments be included in this decisional process? We have found some feature of accessibility that is helping us towards that goal. And those are the semantic structures that HTML is giving us in order to make the code easier to understand for machines. The ARIA labels, which are a very common feature and that are very useful, and we will cover in a few minutes. To learn about the mouseless navigation, to normalize data, and to think about how we are using the colors in our data visualization. And then we will see one of the trending topic in the data visualization at the moment, which is the sonification. Those are all features that are recent or from a long background, but are all features that we can use and we can easily make the approach of impaired people easier to our data visualization, infographics or just charts. But if we stick to some of that features, everything will be easier for all of us to read. Let me show you some example. Let's start with ARIA labels. Imagine going to a museum, and that's what you see. Can be really modern art, but it can be annoying. That's the problem when a user with screen readers approaches to one of the 70% websites we talked about before. And that's where the ARIA alt attributes are coming to help us. The screen readers recognize easily a structure that is well formed, where it can recognize the start, the center part, the end, and can recognize where the content is. The ARIA attributes help the screen readers to control the inner element. For example, to hide something, to change the content to something in order to make it easier to understand. The alt attributes make the same to let the screen reader understand what's the content inside that element. Other semantical elements like footer readers are helping the screen readers too, and are helping us to remove something that is poor graphical, hidden elements, or something else that would not be so much useful for screen readers and for visually impaired user. Let's start with an example. Imagine the picture we saw before, and imagine that that part of code, that piece of code in HTML, is trying to describe it. As you can see, we got just a source, a class that is not giving us so many informations. So we can try to make it better. We can try to tell, first of all, that this is a figure. And we can say that inside there is an image. We can give that image a caption as we saw in various museums, and tell what there is inside. And we can also use the ARIA label to specify what there is inside and some specific information. For example, some information about the picture in that case. And what about if someone arrives in front of us, or there is some content that some developer put inside our code? If we are willing to keep it for people without visual impairments and without screen readers, we can also decide to remove it if it's not necessary. Just adding an ARIA label and saying, okay, that element should be hidden. And we will still see hear the content, we will hear all the ARIA label, but that element will be skipped because it's not necessary. Now let's get to the next section. Jokes aside, it's very important to think that we are used from the 70s to a small device that we have on our desktop, that is the mouse. We are used to it, we automatically use it whenever possible, and we are now getting used to touch gestures too. But we have to think that many people has problem with using precision device like that, or have problems with the usage of hands, or with the usage of the body. So we need to understand that we should also design something that will be available to people that have not the possibility to use our common devices. Let's see some example. I don't want to give any good, bad design connotation to anything. I just want to share with you some ideas that we can take. So don't take those are bad examples. Those are really beautiful infographics and are very useful. But we need to find some way to make them more accessible. In those two examples, you can see that the mouse is the most important element that is moving inside the visualization. But if someone can't use the mouse, it will be very difficult to reach a specific point in the infographic. And if I want to use ARIA labels inside that element, I will not be able to do it because I will need the capacity to get to a specific point, and I will not be able with a screen reader. And I will not be able to do it if I'm not using a mouse, if I'm using a tone controller, if I'm using a visual controller, it will be very, very difficult. And people with the keyboard only will not be able to control anything in here. I would like to show you a brief example, if you are able to see it. This is a very beautiful and useful data visualization, I think. But the problem here is that the only way I have to browse that data is using the mouse. This is something that we can try to avoid in some way. How can we do it? We can do it using the so-called mouseless navigation. We can try to create a pattern for the user in order to move in our infographics, in our data visualization. We can try to create a story behind that. So the user will be able to follow it, to understand what we are trying to say, and will also see the data available when it's needed, not in a specific point somewhere in the visualization. If we see an example, we can see this example from Bloomberg, where I will move just using the keyboard, and as you will see, all the part that is related to some content will be graphical too, but we'll also have a caption that will tell us what is happening and will also show us and will also show us the data that there is behind, and we'll try to talk about what is the content. So even people that will just have the keyboard available will be able to see it and to understand what the ET editor content created. So it's something that it's priceless to me, and it's something that a good design could take care of. Now let's switch to the news part that is related to the usage of data. Because first of all, to make something accessible, but not just for accessibility, our data must be understandable and clear to read and to understand. Now let me share you an example. I will suggest you to close your eyes and try to hear what this table is trying to tell you.
Country, Tabella. Average rain volume, mm. Average sunny days per year. Austria _flag image Austria.
I hope you can hear.
120.23. 80.12. Belgium _flag image Belgium. 134.123. 75.5. France _flag image France. 215.454. 56.3. Germany _flag image Germany. 120.000. 65. Italy _flag image Italy. 80.167. 120.8. Spain _flag image Spain. 56.432. 243.
Okay. That was a common table, data table used in the web. let's say that this is also a good solution in some specific fallback cases, because many data visualization does not provide a fallback option like this one. Sometimes you are even lucky to hear data like that. But as you could hear, the data was really dirty, because you can hear the flag image name that was not so useful. You would hear all the decimal number of that elements without context. So if you could not remember the column you were browsing, you could be misled to that data. So this is an idea of a data table not so clear. Now let's try to hear this one instead.
This table represents the average rain volume and sunny days in the selected countries. Country.
Average rain volume.
Average rain volume. The volume threshold is low if below a threshold of 50 millimeters. High over 100 millimeters. Very high over 200 millimeters. Average sunny days per year. Row 1, country Austria. Rain volume, high. 80 sunny days. Row 2, country Belgium. Rain volume, high. 75 sunny days. Row 3, country France. Rain volume, very high. 56 sunny days. Row 4, country Germany. Rain volume, high. 65 sunny days. Row 5, country Italy. Rain volume, medium. 120 sunny days. Row 6, country Spain. Rain volume, low. 253 sunny days.
Okay, as you could hear, that one was very different. Because first of all, there was a caption that was trying to tell you what the content would be about. There was a description for every column that was telling you the rules of that column numbers. The elements that were useless were hidden, and the data was put in a threshold in order to make it easier to understand, because maybe we don't want to know the specific decimal of that millimeters of rain, but we want to know if there was a lot of rain last year or it was most of the year sunny. So we are trying to do it normalizing the data. And if you noticed, in the last table I used the mouse. Here I used only the keyboard. So, wait a second. Okay. How can we do it? First of all, we can use the useful captions, because they help really a lot to understand. We can avoid mouse-only features. We can use ARIA labels. We can use tab index. We can explain, and that's the most important part, we can explain the column content for every column, at least in the header. We should highlight the rows where we are to make it easier to understand at which point of the data we are. We need to remove something that will be maybe necessary in specific cases, but most of the time would be unnecessary. And we should reduce the complexity of the data in order to make it easier to read, to understand, and to memorize. Now let's get to a topic that is very near to me. The visibility is something that is related to our data visualization, because sometimes we think, first of all, to the colors, to the graphics, and this is the most important part for us to create something catchy. But it's not the solution for everybody, because if the usability laws are still clear in my mind, a color or an icon cannot represent themselves a value. We are used to it. For example, we are used to semaphores, to red equal to bad and green equal to good. But we shouldn't use a color in that way for something that is not a default pattern for all the world. We need to use the colors as helper, not tie meanings around colors. And the thumb rules here is also, if you have to use colors to make the data clear, I think that the problem is the data, not the colors. So to create something that will be really useful for everybody, I want to try to tell you how a colorblind person can see the normal charts that we are used to every day. Oh, sorry, something started behind. Okay, this is a chart that I took with iCharts that is talking about the rainfall. Sorry for the topics that we also saw before, but is something that where you can find the data quite easily. And we can see the 4 different cities. Now let's try to change the view to my delta anomaly. This is the issue that I have at the moment. Is quite common. I think it's about 5% of the male population. And as you can see, we had something different, but it's still easy to understand the goal of who created this chart. Now let's go to a more rare anomaly, which is the prenatopy, that is about related to 1.3% of the male population and 0.02% of the females. Yeah, the color blindness is more popular between men than women. And as you can see, we have London and Berlin that are becoming quite similar. It's a bit difficult to understand the difference between them. Imagine to have 5 colors in those color schema. It will be very difficult to understand. Now let's get to a different blindness, that is the one related to the blue. This is also rarer than the other one. And as you can see now, the blue is different, and it's different to understand which one of them is what. And now we get to the last one, the rarest form of color blindness, the total color blindness, achromatopsia, which is something related to one male over 1 million about. But as you can see, it's completely impossible to understand with the legend or without the legend what was the goal of the creator of that chart. Now imagine those beautiful charts with all those colors seen by something with one of those visual impairments. And I like the first one a lot. The first one is one of my preferred chart. Imagine to be some colorblind that is not able to read the difference between day and job admin or food and leisure. You know that the color is bringing some meaning, some dimension, and that dimension will be lost. In the case to the right, this is even worse because it is a clear dimension. The chart goal maybe is to create a third dimension to browse the data. And it's a good idea. The problem is that colorblind person will not be able to see the difference between them. So a big part of the meaning of that chart will be lost. We need to be aware of that. And one solution, easy solution, is using the textures. Textures are, let's say, an alternative to color. You can also colorize them. And nowadays, all the major chart engines have a texture management, and there are also many libraries around, as you can see in Texture.js, but there are many more. We need to think that if we want that data to be available to anyone, we can think about using textures. Why not? There are also smaller texture like the one I used in the pie charts inside the presentations. So they are not so aggressive. I know that they are not so good looking like some other example, but we need to think them as an alternative. If we need to provide a wide range of users, we need to think of that possibility. And there are many colorblind friendly palettes. Let's say that at the moment, from the WCAG recommendation to EBM designer to other color schemes from private, the idea is to create the most wide perceived contrast between all the different colors. So when we are using these palettes, we are almost sure that all the type of color blindness will see a contrast between the elements that we are using. So if we are using texture and we are also using a colorblind friendly palette, we will be almost sure that anyone will see that color, or will see the differences, that contrast. And now let's get to the last part. I can say maybe the most trending topic nowadays in accessible data visualization, the sonification. The idea is to use the sound to represent a visual data and maybe to enhance it. The problem behind sonification is that often is used to make beautiful sounds. For example, I've heard a blues over the COVID-19 data. So maybe is an idea to create good data representation, but it's not the sonification intended for the accessibility patterns. And the idea is that can be used, the sonification, to transform data into useful sounds. That word is very important. And can be useful also for not impaired user. For example, if you are returning home by car, you can hear some data instead of watching it or reading it on your smartphone. You can hear you can easily hear the data, and if it's well done, maybe you will also understand all the meaning behind. Now I would like to show you some example. This is the first kind of sonification we can see, and is the sound to enhance sonification. So we are trying to use the sound to enhance something. For example, let's see what is happening here. I will make the audio available. You will see this noise, you will hear this noise that is telling us that the COVID-19 is spreading. And you will just hear a noise, a sound, but without using the visual representation of that page, you will not be able to understand what that sound means. Sorry, there is a problem with my hardware. Okay. So, as I said, you will hear something that will help you visualize it, but will not give you meaningful data. The other option is to use the sound to communicate something, to create a story. And this is a very good example. I would suggest you to hear it. This is the story behind a blind girl that is telling us how the life is going in her country, and is telling us playing the flute. So I will just let you hear some of the most important passages. You will see the chart that is easily represented, and you will also hear sounding the flute. Like that. All this website is made around that idea. She will let us hear many of that data with the flute. This storytelling process is helping us a lot to understand what she would like to say. And the flute idea with the text and the part that she is telling us is helping to create a story behind. Then there's the other way, is the way to map differently to create a new dimension that will be easy to hear. For example, this is how we can imagine the scale of COVID's death toll. It's not an happy topic, but if you were paying really attention, you will be able to understand the direction and the entity of the data changing. Let's say that the caption and the voiceover for some part are also helping impaired user to get the context. So this is something that together is creating a new dimension that will be helpful for impaired user and for people without any impairments too. And then let's get to another example that has been created from the Financial Times. That is, I think, the most complex one I saw in a few years. It's been created by musicians, and the idea is to show and to make understandable the US yield curve for the years from 80s until I think the 2020. 1980. You will hear that the months, the years are changing. You will also hear the values that are changing. 83. This is a very, let me stop it. This is a very difficult representation to make for most of us, but it's something that is creating a new way to represent data. This is a real sonification. We have taken the data, we have put scale in years, in time, and we are creating, let's say, a new way to see that data. It will be different, we will take a lot of time to be used to it, but it's something that is very amazing. And now let's get to the conclusion. Concluding, we must remember that we are in a digital revolution era. And we forgot, as you have seen in the timeline, for many years to allow everyone the access to the digital and to something. Now we rediscover the data importance and the power that it represents. So we cannot leave anyone behind in that part. I can say, and we can say, that it's a sort of discrimination. As you can see, we have already many technologies, a fervent open source communities, the public administrations that is helping us to create something that can be beautiful for the most, but useful for all. So please, let's help everybody to visualize data.
David, thank you very much for this great presentation. I have so many takeaways from this. I was very, very impressed by the fact that there's like 70% of the webs are inaccessible. It means that there's a lot to do. We work a lot on data visualization. It's something we always discuss in our webinars, but it's true that explaining it is not enough. You really have to make it inclusive to everyone. So we have to make sure that all the impairments are somehow included. So thank you very much for bringing this angle. I think we'll have a lot to learn here. There are a few questions. I also think that there was a lot of clarity in your presentation. So I have a few questions. I would like to start with one, just to break the ice. We are aware now that there are several ways of impairment: communication, visual, mobility. From a designer point of view, where would you start? Where would you recommend to start? Like from the impairments that are more where we have more population, or how would you start the practice to put it in place?
Oh, sorry. You said that where should we start redesigning something, or where should we start from scratch?
Let's say redesigning something.
Finding something, sorry?
Let's say redesigning something.
Okay.
Sorry for the echo.
Sorry. I think we should start from, of course, the public administration part, because it's something that the law is telling us that should be accessible to everyone, because many services behind are needed nowadays. But after that, I think that we need to start with everything that is common and useful for everybody. For example, I think that Twitter nowadays is very important. When you are creating some visual and you are sharing in Twitter, in Instagram or similar, they have a very strong meaning sometimes. Not just a picture of me going to the seaside, but I think about something like the open data representation of the COVID, of the Vaccination Act, something similar that will be shared between the social network. If we had the possibility to make it easier to understand to everybody, by using correct colors, by being available to bring some content behind, that would be very useful. And then we will move to the private area. That is, I can say, in that 70% of inaccessible web, I think it's related at 90% is the private area. So if you are creating a beautiful website, a beautiful content, a beautiful data representation, usually it's very difficult to find anything that will be accessible. Now accessibility is I said, is not very common in data visualization. But I must say that in the last year, I've met a lot of persons talking about accessibility, and very good data visualizer, data scientists that are asking how to make them accessible. So it's becoming a trending topic, and we need to make that trend continue, not just with the web, but also in the data visualization. We have to think where we can fit something that we are just able to see, and we need to provide different way to do it. So,
David, thank you very much for this reply. Yes, I agree that, I mean, this has been always part of our society, but it's true that lately I've been seeing more communities of practice and accessibility internally. So it's something we internally in the public sector we really want to address. We have also another question from Carmen De Falco. She asked about the examples you shared with us on the different sounds, like to explain the data. Would these sounds be perceived the same way by people with different culture or background? David, you're muted. Yes, thank you.
This is something we need to experiment. because we have seen some example of sonification, but we are in a very early stage. We need to use that sound as an helper. Is the same way that we use the colors. We use them as an helper, and we need also to provide this help with the sound, with the music. So we need to make different experiments, and we, in the future, I hope, we need to provide a common pattern. But we are in an early stage. If you want to experiment with different cultures, different countries, I think that's exactly the point where we have to start.
Great, thank you very much, David. Another question is from Ikaterini. It's why keyboard is considered more accessible? Aren't there cases where people cannot use it?
Yeah, there are many different input devices. We are used to the most common ones. For example, we are used to the mouse, we are used to the keyboard. The keyboard is not inaccessible. The keyboard is one of those devices. The idea behind accessibility is to make the widest range of devices in order able to access to something. So if you are someone that has not the possibility to use the mouse, the keyboard is a good fallback. If you are not able to use the keyboard because maybe you have just a joypad, tone controller, a head controller, or I don't know, a voiceover controller, you will not be able to use the keyboard and you will not be able to use the mouse. We need to provide a different way also for them. But let's say that the easiest fallback solution usually is the keyboard, at least if we direct the keyboard usage to the up and down. So many of the other controllers, I said, will be able to use the direction, going up, going down.
Thank you very much, David. And Beatriz Fernandez is asking, who are your main clients, private companies or the public sector?
Sorry, I was not able to hear the second word. The company or?
Who are your main clients, private companies or the public sector?
We have both customer. It depends on the project, on the single project meaning, but we are working with both of them. We are working in open source sector, so there is a lot of people that is using it as a private and a lot of persons that are using it for public administration. But I would say that the public administration is the one that is pushing towards accessibility more.
Thank you very much, David. And just to finish the last question from Asa, do you have links to guidelines on how to get the metadata right and make websites more accessible?
For sure, I suggest to see the WCAG documentation, the one I linked during the timeline. That is really, really important for all web developers around, because it has a very specific documentation regarding almost every pattern, almost everything you can cover with accessibility in the web, starting from the usage of colors, the usage of contrast, and the position of the content. So that's for sure the most important part. It's been made, written by an independent group of persons that loves a lot the web. So one is the inventor of the web. So I think that's the starting point. Then there is a lot of literature, a lot of websites that are helping. For example, the The screenshot of the charts that I've put in the presentation were taken from a colorblind simulator that is available around. So there is a lot of documentation around the web. You just have to choose the path that is most useful for you and for your product and start from here.
Great, David, thank you again very much. Now, if you don't mind, I would like to change the slide just to like the next one, please. Okay. So, okay, first of all, thank you again very much. I think it's very important, these guidelines you shared. Maybe we will share them later with the community, with this community who are now on this webinar, are also in the community of practice on data visualization. Please do not miss the next webinar that we have on the 21st of May. It will be Steve Alvarez, who will present how visual analytics helps to the European Investment Fund to deliver insights into public funding. Steve Alvarez is working for the Information Lab in Luxembourg. You can register via uLearn, or you can also access all the webinars together with the one from Davide Vernassa on YouTube. It will be published very soon. Next slide, please, David. Yes, and as you know, we have the first EU Open Data Days 2021 launched. It's going to try to bring open data closer to citizens by providing the right tools to the EU public sector. So we have the EU DataViz 2021, in which we had the great honor to have Davide Vernassa to explain to us about data accessibility. So it's an international conference on open data and data visualization. And in case you are interested to be a speaker, please submit your proposal by the 21st of May. We're looking for speakers who can bring new value and new insights on data visualization and open data. Or there's also EU Datathon, that is the open data competition that promotes reuse of EU public data. So we invite teams from all around the world to develop applications according to the European Commission priorities. And the call for abstracts is also the 21st of May. David, next slide, please. Thank you. So these are the dates. So the first 2 days are going to be on EU DataViz, first day on EU open data, the second on data visualization, and the third one is going to be the data competition. Next slide, please.
This was the last one.
Oh, okay, so there was the last one missing. So thank you again very much for this presentation, David.
Thank
we'll
you.
publish it again in the YouTube channel, and we hope that these takeaways, we can implement them further and really try to think how we can make data visualization more accessible for everyone. Thank you.